Hey guys, I'm Tim. Today we're going to talk about holsters. And man, have they came a long way since they first came out, and I first started using them back in the 90s. So where I come from, it was Kansas. It was Kansas just full of pastures. Growing up, we rode horses and we roped cattle and we had fun doing that type stuff. So I was used to wearing the cowboy boots and the cowboy hat. But whenever I became a police officer, a sheriff's deputy, everything had to be leather. Our whole duty belt was made completely of leather. Our boots had to be shined, and we had to be looking good at all times. But I became a canine officer once I got out of the jail. And leather boots were not really ideal for running after criminals and chasing after a dog all the time, not to mention having to crawl underneath cars and go through brush and do everything that canine officers do. Leather was getting tore up all the time. The brush would just eat it up, and I was constantly buying kiwi and buffing that belt out and all the equipment I had on it all the time. So as time went on, I talked the sheriff into letting me change up my uniform and switch over the BDUs. And back then, the first tactical boots came out were called high-techs, and you were really cool if you were wearing a pair of high-techs, and later it would become Danners, and the brands just kept going. But at that time, it was high-techs, and we were able to wear our tactical pants and even a polo at first, and later we'd switch over to more of a military shirt with all of our patches sewed on, which made the life of a canine handler a lot better when you're having to go through brush and follow a dog. So I'm going to talk to you today from the security side of things and talk to you about some of the things that we ran across as a security company. Now man, just when I thought I've seen it all, I've heard it all, there was a security guard that came in here and really gave me a new idea to think about and talk about and actually laugh about. This guy came well recommended from several other security companies. He's been doing it for a while, so when he showed up, we had confidence that he was going to be a great employee. But when he showed up, his duty belt was a Carpenter belt. And this isn't the same one. This is one I actually have around here. But this is the same type of belt that he was wearing. But it was black, to give him that. So it was all blacked out. But at the end of the day, it's made to fix a house. It's not made to go on duty. And I saw that and I thought he was trying to pull my leg. So I went and talked to him. I said, hey, what's with this Carpenter belt you're wearing? He said, oh, that's my holster, and that's where I keep my handcuffs and my magazines. And he goes, it works out really well. I said, oh, yeah. I said, how long have you been wearing that? And he goes, for years now. He said, it's a really good piece of kit that I have on my belt. And I said, well, you know, I have some concerns here. How do you keep your pistol in there? And what if someone was to fight with you and take it away from you? It's going to fall right out of that belt. And he said, oh, don't worry about that. It's just a BB gun. Even if they got a hold of it, they're not going to hurt anybody with it. And I said, what? You're carrying a BB gun? He goes, oh, absolutely. I've carried one for about 5 years now. So, guys, even though the references check out, don't mean the people check out. So whenever someone comes through, get a good eyeball on that equipment and see what they're carrying, and what their idea of duty equipment isn't the same idea that duty equipment is to me. Just like we had another guy come through and he had a holster like this. I actually traded it out with him and gave him a normal holster, but it was made out of nylon. It was very flimsy. It looks like it really doesn't fit any gun. And he was trying to cram a Glock down in that, and it was hardly fitting inside there, and it just looked like it was ready to fall out. Not to mention it has some kind of, not even any kind of way to really retain it on a belt very well. So don't wear these. There's all kinds of different brands, and if you get in a physical fight with someone, you're probably going to lose your gun. I'll tell you about a time back in the 90s. I was wrestling with a guy on a road, and next thing you know, we're down on the ground and we're going after it, and I look down on the ground and I see a gun that looks just like mine. I'm thinking, man, this guy's got a gun just like mine. And once I get him handcuffed up, I found out it was my gun. And back in those days, we were wearing very simple holsters with just a thumb brake on them, and the gun would just fall out of the holster without any issues at all. And this is actually the same holster. You can see that it's all worn now and tore up. It's had a lot of years on it. But back in those days, this is what we wore. We didn't have security holsters, and they were out, but nobody were really caring or talking about them. So most of the guys, once you switched over to the nylon gear, this is what they were wearing. And in a tactical unit, working a dog, nylon gear worked out really well because, you know, it was tactical. It wasn't a leather for one, and it went real good with our BDU pants. So leather, these type of holsters were pretty normal back in those days. And then I switched over to the SWAT team, and I got one of these holsters. It's a drop leg holster, but if you notice, it doesn't have any retention. And back in those days, we're carrying the USP 40s with the tack lights on them. So this part here that Velcros across would help keep my tack light in there with my gun, but that's about it. And I remember one night we're crawling through the bushes, checking out some meth labs and some warrants that we're going to do. We're doing surveillance out there in the middle of the country, and we're crawling through, and we get up to the house that we're doing surveillance on. I noticed that my gun's no longer in the holster. It fell out in the brush somewhere, and now we have 2 miles of fields to go back through and try to figure out where it fell out. And luckily we were able to find the gun, and it hadn't been missing for very long, so we found it pretty quick. But how embarrassing was that? And you know, you don't want to lose your gun, and what if we would have needed it? It wasn't there no more. But we wore these drop leg holsters, and this was back in the 90s as well. And something wrong with this was they had 2 big old straps on it, and these came down almost to our knees, which was a horrible fit. And I would never recommend you wear anything like that. Again, if you're going to wear a drop leg holster, wear something like this where it drops it down. You got security, retention. You got ways to keep a hold of your gun. This one's actually made by Safariland, and I wore this holster for a very long time, and it did a great job. And whenever you're looking at doing a drop leg holster, it shouldn't be down around your knees. It shouldn't be down on the mid thigh. It should be very high, close to your belt. And I do mine on the very last strap I can get it on, so it gets as high up on my body, and then it just has one strap around my leg, because you don't want it flopping around when you're trying to run, and when you're fighting someone, you want that retention and your strength up tight to your body, and you don't want it out there on your legs. So this is not a good idea to let it wear like that, but if you can keep it tight. The reason that we wear the drop leg holsters is just to get it away from our tactical vest. With all of our gear that's already up here, it's rides too high that the vest actually touches the top of it, so it drops it down just enough on your leg to where it clears all that, but yet not long enough to where it's going to flop around. If you run across the field or get in a fight or anything like that, you can still keep it tight. And it also takes a tack light. And I recommend that you have a weapon-mounted light system on your weapon, and not necessarily for searching all the time. We'll talk about that on a whole nother day, but just to have it. But commonly what we've been finding a lot of are these type of holsters. I believe they're called a Serpa, and the gun locks in them, and it has a retention where it can release. I don't recommend these for duty either, just because it's not really made for duty. It is a sturdy holster, but someone can still get your gun out pretty quick, and I'm not sure how your retention would be with one of these. It looks like it could break under a lot of stress, so I wouldn't recommend, if you're in a patrol type position, a security guard position, that you buy and wear one of these. But if you're just out shooting at the range, or need somewhere to safely lock your gun up and keep it in a holster, this isn't a bad option. Or if you got a desk job to where you're just in the office all the time, it's not really a bad option for that as well, but definitely not anything I would ever carry for duty. So that's really all I got for you guys today. A lot of different options for you guys. Main thing is, buy your equipment one time. Kind of like a plumber, I tell all my new people that's coming through, whenever you become a plumber, you got to buy a bunch of tools. A carpenter has to buy a bunch of tools, and a mechanic has to buy a bunch of tools. And these tools are of your profession, so you should get a high grade, high quality, look at it as a one-time investment, and go with that. Because at the end of the day, this Blackhawk holster, this Safariland holster that I have, this has now been around me for about 15 years. So it's been around for a long time, and this old battle horse has been around since 1996, 97. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone today's date, because it doesn't maintain any kind of a retention. But back in the day, these were kind of more expensive holsters back then. So find something that works. Find something that keeps your weapon retained, at least a level 1, 2, or 3. I prefer a 2 or 3, just to make sure it stays in there where it's supposed to be. You can win that fight. You don't have to fight for your own gun sometime, which is a horrible thing to do. And take those type of training courses. But the main thing is, if this is all you can afford, is something very cheap and flimsy, it's better to wait and just not wear that until you have enough money built up to where you can purchase that. And sometimes you can get loans, you can get advances on your checks, stuff like that, to buy a piece of kit. But I definitely wouldn't go out and wear anything like this. For one, it doesn't make you look the greatest. It kind of makes you look like a joke. It makes it look like you're not put together well. You're not a professional, so don't wear it. And the guys around you, I have extra holsters. I've given my holsters out to people before until they could afford, after a paycheck or two, to buy one. And I recommend, if you have a couple extra holsters laying around, to do that, help a guy out until he gets back up on his feet. So with all that said, that's all I'm going to say for you guys tonight. I hope you all are out there having a good time, and stay caffeinated and awake, and we'll see you in the next video.